Hi, my name is Dr. Mike Hart, and welcome to the Stoned Age. My name is Michael Hart, and I'm a family physician.
What is a lifestyle strategist?
The lifestyle strategist is someone who employs strategies in their life that makes their life better. Sometimes people don't plan. There's a quote. Do you plan to fail, or do you fail to plan? A lot of people, they fail to plan, and because they fail to plan, life kind of isn't happening for them. They don't really understand why certain things are happening, and it's really because they're failing to plan, they're failing to implement good strategies in their life to make their life better.
Got you. So what got you into medicine?
So I've always been really into fitness and health. Like even since I was like 14 years old, that's the first time I stepped into a gym. And I do a lot of martial arts. I follow a very strict diet. So because of all that, I just want to learn as much as I possibly can about the human body. And I feel that a lot of the things that I'm researching are really effective and can help a lot of people. And I think that we need to bridge the gap a little bit between natural medicine and pharmaceutical medicine, and just find out really what works. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what my focus is on.
Got you. Why have you started using cannabis as a therapeutic option when treating patients in your practice?
Well, I felt that a lot of people were using medications that they weren't getting adequate relief from, and I knew from some personal experience as well that using cannabis can be really effective for sleep in particular. So that was really like the first indication why I wanted to use it. There was a study done in the journal of I think it was a British medical journal, somewhere around 2013, and they showed that just by having sleeping pills in your system, it can increase your risk of death by threefold. And a lot of people who do use sleeping pills do get addicted to them. Mm-hmm. And not only do they get addicted to them, they feel sort of like hungover the next day, or like slow cognition, poor memory. So even though they might be getting more sleep, it's not really more restful sleep, and they're not really getting the benefits of a good night's sleep. But when you use cannabis, a lot of people report that they're getting much better quality sleep than they have before. So the duration and the quality seems to be effective.
So, okay, even though we're living in a bit of a stoned age, there's some people that kind of don't really know that there's actually cannabis, regular cannabis, is used for medicinal purposes. So they think that there's a difference between medical cannabis and regular cannabis. So my question to you is, what is the difference between regular cannabis and medical cannabis?
To me, the only real difference is that medical cannabis is going to be prescribed by a physician, whereas recreational cannabis is going to be something that you're going to buy at a dispensary. But in terms of the whole therapeutic regimen, if you're going to a physician, then you really should be getting some advice on specifically how to use the cannabis for your specific ailments. So if you're going to a doctor and you have really bad seizures, you're going to want to chat mostly about CBD. But if you're going to a doctor and say you have something like sciatica, which does tend to respond a little bit more to THC, then you're going to want to use a little bit of THC. So those are some of the things that sometimes physicians can offer to patients who are using medical cannabis, whereas recreational cannabis is more for people who just kind of want to have an extra buzz or have a good time on a Friday or a Saturday night. And in my personal opinion, I don't really see a big detriment to someone if they do want to partake in that. Like in Canada, our safe alcohol guidelines are 14 drinks a week for men, 9 drinks a week for women. So, there's obviously has been something in place that indicates that, even the government would indicate that, it is safe sometimes to, consume things recreationally. And I think that considering, cannabis is, so much less harmful than alcohol, I don't think that there's a real big issue with doing that.
But basically, same plant, just used for different ways.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you can, the only difference I would say, and I mean, this may change in the future too, like it would just be the supply. So sometimes, the medical supply will have more CBD than say the recreational supply. But I mean, you can't say that one plant is different than another. So no, they're both cannabis, they're both the same, absolutely.
I had to ask that question because there's some Barbadian older folks that are like, yeah, we want medical cannabis, but we don't want the regular cannabis, we don't want the regular marijuana, because they seem to think that it's two different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How does your diet influence, how does a person's diet influence a response to cannabis?
So this is, what I'm going to be talking about today, and I'm really excited to present this presentation because I've never done it before. So, the big thing that people should really know is that cannabis users on average actually have a lower body mass index than non-cannabis users. So meaning that if you use cannabis, you're more likely to weigh less than someone who does not use cannabis. And there's been 9 studies that have shown that, and they've all shown a positive correlation between cannabis users having a lower BMI than non-cannabis users.
You mean with all the munchies? Even though you're getting munchies and you eat a lot?
So, and that's the interesting part. There's a couple studies, there's 3 or 4 actually, that have shown that cannabis users have lower BMIs despite eating more. And like there's a couple studies where they're eating pretty significantly more calories, like over 500, over 600 calories a day than non-users, but they still weigh less, right? So there is an explanation behind that, and I can give it to you, and I'll try and be as not as geeky as I can. Okay, so a lot of people know there's an omega-6 and an omega-3 fatty acids. So in hunter-gatherer days, our ratio was around 1:1 or 1:3 of omega-6 to omega-3. Right now, because our diet is so bad, the ratio on average is 20:1. And that's just the average. So there's some people are probably walking around with like 30:1, 40:1 ratios. So if you have a really bad omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio, your metabolism will be basically broken. So it will really slow down your metabolism. So what happens is, once you have, if you have a balanced amount of omega-6 to omega-3, then anandamide and 2-AG, which attach to the CB1 receptor, that will just produce normal effects, meaning that there's nothing going to be slowing down your metabolism, and there's nothing that's going to be increasing the storage of fats, the increase of fat storage uptake. But if you use a little bit of cannabis, what happens is it skews that ratio.
Is there science behind the use of particular cannabis strains, application, method, and dosage for different medicinal purposes? So for example, if you have a seizure, what's the best strain is there a science behind finding the best strain to use and the best mode of transport for the drug, for cannabis?
So, we don't have as many studies as we would like to have, that's for sure. And then, like we were kind of discussing earlier, I think it's best in the medical part to kind of get away a little bit from like the strain and just focus more on the cannabinoids and terpenes and make it more medicinal. And then, to answer your question, I mean, if someone has, a seizure disorder, then you're going to want them to use, something like an oil, because it's just going to be easier for that to be in their system, say, all day than, using dried bud. But, say if someone's having like a panic attack or something like that, or if they're having a migraine, in those situations, you want the onset to be immediate. And we know that oils do and edibles take a little bit of time to kick in. So because of that, in those for those ailments, you'd want something fast acting. So, vaporizing would definitely be a better choice. But we don't, unfortunately, have too many studies right now on dosages and routes of administrations.
So what about the oil, using the oil topically for like migraines? The reaction time is still going to be just as slow or slower than if you were to vape it?
Using the oil for migraines topically?
Yeah.
You know what, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. If you can use, it's a really good question, if you can use, that topically for a migraine. But, maybe, I know that, not to get too off topic, but I know that, peppermint oil is an essential oil, and that has been shown when you apply it topically to the temples and to the forehead region to be just as effective as 2 extra strength Tylenol for like a mild tension headache. But I can't really comment on whether the effectiveness of vaporizing or eating dried cannabis would be just as effective as applying it topically. But something we should research. So hopefully I'll have a better answer for you next time.
In my personal experience, the answer is yes. How has the use of cannabis medicinally helped some of your patients?
Well, maybe we should just talk about, the main or big conditions that it helps with. So, chronic pain would probably be number one. Sleep, though, is right up there.
Do you have any anecdotal stories? Any?
Yeah, and I was just going to say the last one would probably be mental health. But yeah, so I have, I've treated a lot of veterans. And a lot of veterans really struggle with their sleep. They have vicious nightmares at night. They wake up in night sweats, and then when they wake up in the morning, they're groggy because they didn't really get a good night's sleep. So, I've treated probably close to 1,000 veterans, maybe a little bit less. I'm not really too sure the exact number with medicinal cannabis, and the results that we've gotten have been just fantastic so far. There's people who say to me all the time, this is the best sleep I've had in 10 years. I finally know what it's like to wake up rested. So, there's lots of stories like that out there. Unfortunately, we don't have a ton of data on sleep right now, though.
Okay, so do you have patients that you've prescribed medical cannabis to, and they've been unable to get their treatment? And how, if yes, how has that affected them?
Yes, so the answer to that is absolutely yes. So, in Canada right now, a lot of people know Canada to be a nation that provides, universal health care, is what they say. But, they don't cover the cost of medical cannabis in Canada right now. So because they don't cover the cost, I've prescribed cannabis to patients, but they're unable to get their prescription, purely just due to the cost alone and nothing else. And it's really unfortunate that that's happened because, a lot of the times it's the people who are most sick who actually need cannabis the most. Because when you just think about it, people who are disabled, who have really severe issues that can't work, obviously they're not bringing in an income. And because they're not bringing in an income, it's very difficult for them to pay for their prescription. So, in those cases, it's definitely a little bit frustrating on my behalf and on the patient's behalf because, we've gone through a treatment plan together. We've both, collectively decided that, using cannabis in this way would probably be best for them. But, the thing is that if they can't afford it, that strategy can't be implemented. And so really it becomes useless at the end of the day and very frustrating for myself and for the patients.
And I would imagine it would negatively impact like the rest of their lives, as in their relationships, work,
yes,
school, that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And on that note too, we were talking a little about travel earlier, and I think this sort of relates to the same topic. So I have some patients, and they're basically almost afraid to travel because they don't know what's going to happen if they don't have their cannabis. And it's unfortunate that people can't really enjoy a vacation because they can't take their medication with them. I have patients who have been on antidepressants, and you've heard probably of patients before who take antidepressants and then they forget them. Say if they go away and, things are just a disaster. They have brutal withdrawal symptoms and these types of things. And the same thing is happening with cannabis because, like we discussed earlier, sure, you can use it recreationally, but, a lot of people now are using it medicinally. And if you have been prescribed a medication by a doctor, whatever it is, you should be able to take that into any country because it's your medication.
Okay, so you spoke about athletes, you spoke about veterans, people with sleep issues, PTSD. Can you tell me who are some other people that can benefit from using cannabis?
Sure. So I guess we didn't talk too much about mental health, at this point. And, that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in my presentation. But what cannabis sometimes can do is it can help facilitate a healthier lifestyle. So meaning that some people can't exercise because they're so anxious. Some people can't exercise because they have so much pain. But if you give cannabis to those patients, the reduction in anxiety kind of takes away that fear that they have of going into a public gym, or not even necessarily even going into a public gym. It's just initiating some type of momentum in their life because they're kind of like paralyzed in this learned fear state. And in addition to that, if you add pain on top of it, that's just going to complicate things and make things worse. So cannabis is not just good for athletes, but it's definitely good for everyday people who just kind of struggle with everyday issues that the average person kind of does struggle with. I think that we've kind of made mental health a little bit too like black and white. Everybody really should be working on their mental health all the time, meaning that if you're going to go to the gym for an hour, that's great because you're working on your physical health, and in terms, you are working on your mental health when you go to the gym too. You're getting those the endorphins and all that type of stuff going. But at the same time, when you get someone to exercise, that can just kind of give them a lot more momentum in their life. So meaning that, if you don't exercise, it's easy to kind of say like grab a box of donuts, but if you exercise, you don't want to do that because you feel like it's almost like a waste, so you kind of get that momentum. So, it's good for people who have, a lot of learned fear, who don't have, a good, healthy lifestyle, and it can just help to kind of initiate a little bit of momentum to get them going.
So what are some of the drawbacks of cannabis? You spoke about, and you were just talking about mental health. And I know that there's some people have had anecdotal stories saying, wow, I know someone that smoked weed, whether for medical or not, and they've had a psychotic break. Are there any neurological drawbacks, any other physical drawbacks from using cannabis medically or medicinally or recreationally?
Sure. I mean, every single medicine basically has risks and benefits. The biggest benefit to cannabis, though, compared to say a lot of pharmaceuticals, especially if you're comparing it to something like opioids, is the fact that cannabis can't kill you, right? I mean, some people may argue that, oh, I know someone who used cannabis and like they walked off a cliff and like maybe that happened, but in terms of like the lethal dosage, you can't die from it. I mean, you'd have to consume, it's something like 1/3 of your body weight would be like the least amount of a lethal dose, which you can't consume.
You fall asleep before then.
Yeah, you can't. So you're gonna fall asleep before you can consume that much. So it's basically impossible to die from the lethal dose from cannabis. But if you walked into any pharmacy or even a gas station right now, you can probably find a bottle of Tylenol. And if you take the whole bottle, there's a really good chance that you're going to die. And if you don't die, it's probably going to mess up your liver really, really bad, and you're going to have a really bad quality of life after that. We don't have those things with cannabis. But, just getting back to answering your question, what are the drawbacks of cannabis? I mean, you can become, a little bit dependent upon it, right? So, the quote that's always used is there's about a 9% risk of addiction to it. So, but the thing is that that's really high THC cannabis. So, so it's important to make that distinguishment. So you can't become addicted to CBD. And I think there's only one study I've seen so far, but there's people who use CBD the same amount as they did, say, 5 years ago, as they do today, and they get the exact same results, right? Now with THC, sometimes if you use some, you're gonna need to use a little bit more to get the same effect. So we don't see that with CBD, which is excellent because it's a fantastic medicine. But there is a little bit of an addiction that's possible with using THC, and then just talking about the schizophrenia connection. So really you don't want people using high THC cannabis if they are a teenager, right? Because the brain is still developing at that point, and because the brain is still developing, THC can interfere with that, and then that may cause some issues later on down the line. And then the other thing too is if you do have like a really strong family history or genetic risk, and we're getting to the point now where I think that maybe in the next 5 or 10 years it's going to be a lot easier for people to get access to their genetic traits, meaning that like you'll probably know like your own genome pretty soon because it is becoming more commercially available. There's so many companies, like 23andMe is probably the biggest one, but there's so many companies out now, coming out now that are providing genetic tests at a much more affordable rate, and things are just kind of going to get more affordable. So what I'm kind of getting at is because the science is evolving with regards to the genes and the genetics, you'll probably see a lot less people have a psychotic break, because you're going to be able to identify those people before they even start using. Because I imagine if you tell someone, hey, you got this gene, then they're probably not going to do it. So between that and then just letting like adolescents know no high THC, but I'm certainly not saying no high CBD for adolescents. So high CBD is fantastic for kids. I think someone did a presentation on that this morning. It's good for adolescents. So again, you want to be specific when using some of those terms. So high potency THC cannabis is not good for people who have a genetic predisposition to schizophrenia, and it's not good for teenagers to do high THC cannabis. But other than that, the risks are pretty low.
You're not just a medical doctor that uses cannabis for as a therapeutic method, but I would say you're an advocate. Why?
I'm very, very interested in the science behind cannabis, and I'm interested in the research that's coming out, and I think that it's just underutilized. I think that and I think that it's a shame that it's underutilized. I think that there's too many people on medicines that really should have been treated with cannabis, and that's a shame for some people, and sometimes people almost get angry when I prescribe them cannabis and they get better, because they say like, why didn't someone tell me about this 10 years ago? And they have some, and like, so they're happy, but they're a little bit frustrated too. They're like what the hell? Like, I tried 3 different sleeping pills, and I couldn't sleep. They all didn't work. No one ever told me anything about cannabis. Like why is that, right? So that's sort of like the gap that I'm trying to bridge right now. And like I said, I have no issues with anyone using it recreationally. I think it's a great recreational tool to use. But at the same time, I do want to be an advocate and legitimize it medicinally.
What are your thoughts on the evolution of the consumption of cannabis for medical purposes? So we moved from smoking is now in pharmaceutical form. You can use it topically, all that. What do you think about the whole evolution of cannabis?
I think it's excellent. You know, it's because, you know, smoking is still, you know, something that's always going to be done, and, you know, I don't condone people who do smoke cannabis. I mean, I certainly state to all my patients that you should, you know, vaporize over smoking, you know, just for, you know, the lung protection's sake. But at the same time, you know, kind of like we discussed earlier, like, I don't think that, you know, sobriety is definitely the right thing for some people in some instances, but it's not the right thing for everybody all the time. And, you know, sometimes, you know, people have had the best nights of their life, the best memories of their life is when they're, you know, with their friends and they're sharing a joint, you know, and that's the thing. You're sharing something. You're having a human connection with someone else, you know, and you're all feeling good together collectively. And, like, I would never ever want to take that away from anybody. But at the same time too, you know, smoking is just one form, and it's not always the best form. Like we discussed earlier about people with epilepsy, you know, and also too, just the half-life and the convenience of it. You can take a little bit of CBD oil, and that can be in your system, you know, for 6 hours, 8 hours. You know, that's how long it lasts for some people. Whereas, you know, with smoking, we know that, you know, you get a good buzz for maybe an hour, 3 hours, maybe max, and then, you know, you kind of need to do it again. And then also too, you know, just with regards to, like, you know, using dry bud and smoking is a lot trickier, a lot more inconvenient than just, say, popping a pill into your mouth, or what you were saying earlier, like, you know, if you had like a roll-on for, like, for migraines, something like that. I know that some people, it's not available in Canada, but you can get patches. Some people have, like, just, you know, they don't have, like, all over body pain. They just have, like, one area that's, like, really, really bad. So I had one patient, and when he was in Colorado, and this guy has really bad back pain, but it's really just in his lower back, like on one side. So it's only about like that big is really the whole area. And so he was able to just get the patch and put it right on that area, and then, you know, it helped, right? So, you know, I think that we do need, that we should just continue to explore different ways. So, you know, even though I'm not against, you know, people smoking at times, I think that, you know, we want to if we want to maximize the medicine and make the most out of the medicine, then we should look at all the different ways, you know, and some ways are going to be better for other people. And, you know, some people can't smoke, you know, it hurts their lungs. And, you know, for some people, like the group of people who I really don't advocate for smoking against, which I would say I am against, is former smokers, because I don't want them to start, former tobacco smokers, because I don't want them to start smoking tobacco if they initiate cannabis smoking. Because there is, I mean, I don't know if there's any real scientific evidence on there, but just logically, you know, a lot of people say that to me as patients. So, like, you know, I used to smoke, I really, you know, don't want to go back to smoking, so let me stay away from it. And, you know, I think that's, you know, is very, very, you know, reasonable, and it's responsible to tell those people, you know, not to do that.
Do you think perhaps those people are addicted to the act of smoking as opposed to necessarily just the tobacco?
Sorry, can you say that again?
I'm wondering,
yes,
if those people that you're talking about,
yes,
would you say that there's a possibility they could
okay,
be addicted to the act of smoking as opposed to what they're smoking?
Yes, so meaning that they could be addicted to, like, oral fixation.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, which is why sometimes, you know, vape pens and things like that work, because you're still getting that oral fixation, and then, you know, people too still like seeing the clouds, you know, so you know, that there's kind of something rewarding, you know, or gratifying about that. So yeah, I think that's personally, that's totally, you know, reasonable.
What measures do you think can be put in place to prevent the consumption of contaminated cannabis?
Prevent the contaminated cannabis?
Yeah.
I mean, I do believe that that the government should, you know, come in and regulate it if with regards to for medical patients, because if you're a medical patient, you should have the right to know everything within your medicine. I mean, if you go to a doctor and you get a prescription, you don't question, oh, is this really Vyvanse? Is this really Concerta? Is this really amoxicillin? Like, you know what it is, And so when people go to a doctor, they should know. I mean, they should have that right. They should, have that right that, the medicine that they're being prescribed is exactly what it is, and that it is held to the exact same standard as any other pharmaceutical in the industry. That to me is medicine, and that's the way that it should be. But at the same time, I'm not here to tell, a grown adult that they can't grow medical cannabis for themselves. But obviously, you're putting yourself slightly at risk because you don't know. You may get a great product, but you may not get a great product. I mean, it's a little bit tricky. So I think that's kind of like the best way to balance it out, is to make sure that those medical products that are available are held to the exact same standard as any other pharmaceutical. But at the same time, I don't want to restrict it so that you have to go to a doctor to get it. It's not fair. It's not ethical.
Last question. What would you tell any Barbadian or Caribbean person, or anyone, for that matter, how they should initiate, or how they could initiate a conversation with their doctor in getting prescribed cannabis?
Well, I think that if you have, a listed condition that cannabis is prescribed for, and, there are many. I mean, it goes from, there's neurological conditions, there's chronic pain, there's mental health, there's insomnia, there's everything. You should be able to chat with your physician about that. Now, the issue is, a lot of times, physicians are not that educated on that subject. So, I think there's no real easy answer or solution to this, but I think the best way to do it is just to explain to the physician that I'm using this particular pharmaceutical. It's not making me feel well. I have used some recreational cannabis that has made me feel well. So logically, if I know that I can get better products from you because yours are regulated and the ones I'm buying are from my friends, and like I really don't know what I'm getting because it could be a different strain or whatever it is from a week to week, then that's kind of unfair. So that person should be able to go to their doctor, and if they're using it medicinally, and they should be able, they should have the right to know, have access to getting a medicinal grade cannabis where everything is held up to the same standard as a pharmaceutical.